You can be aging without children for many reasons.
Hey, I'm Hannah, the Wife Without Kids. This channel is all about building a positive community to support you in your child-free life.
You never could have them. You never wanted to have them. Your children are disabled, so they won't be able to look after you. Your children have died. Your children have moved to Australia. You might be in a second marriage and perhaps those children don't like you.
I think that probably happens more often than we like to talk about.
They're no longer nearby to help you. You don't like your children. You don't want to be a burden on your children. So there are so many reasons.
We automatically sort of think, oh, it's because people didn't have kids and that's why they're aging without children. But that's actually not true. There are many reasons why people can age without children, and she is mentioning several of them.
There is nobody keeping an eye on you, and that's why you're an AWOC, and that's why you're invisible.
AWOCs, otherwise known as anyone aging without children, are facing new challenges every day during this pandemic as they face difficulties without the help of younger family members.
I have never heard of an AWOC before. It kind of reminds me of an EWOC, but I'm pretty sure it's not the same thing. I have no clue if we have anything like this in Canada. I suppose I would be considered an AWOC because I don't have any kids and I'm aging even though I'm still kind of youngish.
But just where and why did this group come about in York back in 2016?
When we started looking into this, there are millions and millions of people, young, old, and everybody else, who are either by sheer circumstance have never been married and have never had children, or are divorced and now their children are not there or whatever. By choice.
I love that she says people of all ages, young and old and everyone in between. I think at every stage of life, people who don't have children need to be supported. It's not just when you're an older person, because when you're younger, you need friends and you need support as well. I think that's a pretty smart thing to do. Start a community for people who are aging without children. I mean, why not? I guess it's similar to like a seniors community center.
Your children have died, your children have moved away, which in this non-nuclear time is common. There are so many reasons why people don't have the next generation down, their adult children, to be there for them in time of need.
Isn't that the truth? I think a lot of times we kind of get this flack, like if you choose not to have kids, you get flack, like, oh, no one's going to be there for you. But you can have kids, and then those kids are not going to be there for you for the reasons that she listed and others. There are many reasons why people are aging without children. It's not just, oh, you didn't have kids, and now you're aging without children. And I'm really glad that she brought that up because I think that's actually a really important point because it's one that we don't hear very often.
To show them how to work a tablet or to take them to the hospital or to whatever it is, there isn't that younger generation to give support. So if you've got a huge gap there, who or what is filling that gap?
Okay, I do have to say this. Even as a person of the younger generation, I find technology infuriating. Sometimes it's very straightforward and I can use it and no problem, and then other times it gets me so frustrated, and I'm so glad I have my husband who is like a tech whiz. He just comes in and he swoops in and he figures it out in like 5 minutes, something that I've been working on for like an hour and couldn't figure out. He's like, oh, you just do this, you do this, you do this, and it's done. I can't imagine how frustrating and overwhelming that must be for the older generation. Now, I will say some of them are extremely adaptable. My grandma, I can't even believe it. She had an iPad and she was mid to late 80s when she got her iPad. And when I would visit her, she would just whiz around on this thing. Like she knew exactly how to use it. I'm not saying that older people don't have the skill set to use new technology, but I think it can be a lot. The learning curve can be really high. And there's so many things that could potentially go wrong or things that can be a challenge to figure out. So I was really impressed with the skill that my grandma had in using her iPad. And I know that there are some older people that just have no interest in learning new technology, and I don't blame them. Honestly, I don't. I bet you anything when I'm in my 80s, there's going to be some new type of technology, and my husband's going to be like, oh, check this out. Don't you want to learn this? And I'll just be like, no, let me just sit here with like my little iPad and my iPhone, and I'll be perfectly content with that, and I probably won't want to learn anything new. So I'm pretty impressed when the older generation is utilizing technology in their daily lives. But she's totally right. It is nice to be able to have someone to show you how all of that works, because it can be pretty complicated.
So aging without children is looking at that gap and seeking solutions.
I think people want to make sure that they don't feel forgotten, and often people feel overlooked anyway. And then obviously during COVID, there's been a lot of media coverage about families, and
there is definitely a gap there. It's actually a gap that exists even when you're younger. Watching this actually makes me think that maybe it's really important to start filling that gap when you're younger rather than waiting until you're older. And so if we can work at filling that gap right now, at creating community, even when we're on the younger side, I think that would probably translate into having a community of people around you that as you age, you're already surrounded by community. You're not suddenly frantically looking for a community of people when you're in your 70s or your 80s.
And we're very aware that a lot of the media coverage has been around people standing outside care home windows, waving at their, elderly parent, or people trying to get their parents online, people not being able to visit in hospitals.
We've heard about this a lot in Canada with the senior citizens' homes being locked down. And the lockdown was extremely strict. I can't even imagine what that would be like. You're stuck in this little room. You probably aren't even able to converse and socialize with the people that you live with, even within your own building, because people were so worried. Obviously, there was so much concern about the older generation catching COVID and how dangerous that could be.
But there hasn't really been much coverage, if any, about people who either live alone or people who live in couples who don't have any family support. I mean, some of the challenges are very practical ones about, particularly for people living alone, accessing food, medication. As Sue mentioned, people being socially isolated, potentially not online.
So if you're an elderly person and you've never used technology, you're almost forced into learning how to use it if you want to have any type of communication with people in the outside world, which could be a little bit overwhelming, but hopefully there was some support there for people so they didn't feel like they had to try to figure it out themselves, because I think most people probably wouldn't be able to figure it out themselves.
Not able to really get all of the support that other organisations might be providing, because people aging without children aren't generally recognised. They're very invisible, and that's one of the things that we've always tried to address with the national group and in local groups.
It is something, I guess, that you really do have to think about even when you're younger, that time will come. And hopefully you will be surrounded with a community of people that can help you or that can aid you in getting the resources and the things that you need to be able to continue on with life. But listening to her talk about it, it really is a real thing, and it is going to happen to all of us, whether or not we have children. And so then the question becomes, do we have something set in place? Do we have a community of people? Are we creating relationships and organizations where we get to help each other?
And it's a growing demographic of people, so there's going to be a lot more people aging without children.
Usually meeting up in person for monthly catch-ups, Sue has been able to adapt their services through lockdown as they enter the virtual world to stay in touch.
Oh, I love that. They're all having a little Zoom meeting together. That's so great.
The Zoom era came upon us, and so we're now holding weekly Zoom meetings for those who can Zoom, and I've found a way for people who are on the telephone to get in on the telephone as well. So we're still trying to be inclusive.
So looking at this, there are people of different ages. There are some that are definitely on the younger side, but there are some here that actually do look like they're older and they're able to connect with people and have that community support. And I think that is so fantastic. And I think it's what a lot of people do need. Whether you're young or you're old, we all need community support at some point in our lives.